In this video, I'm going to be going through a deep dive using NEBOSH's own advice to students, taking you basically step by step through it. This is going to make it so much easier for you if you're struggling with exam technique as it applies to NEBOSH questions, and I think that applies to virtually everybody that takes this exam. This will help. So it's going to be quite in depth. So it's going to span a couple of videos. It's probably going to take me a couple of videos to make this because I want to use the examples in NEBOSH's guidance and pick up on a couple of those examples and then basically take you step by step through what the differences are between different types of questions so that you can really go into that exam armed with the information that you need that's going to get you the pass, or hopefully the distinction. So to start off with, you're going to need a few resources here. The first one on NEBOSH's website, specifically this page. I'll put a link to this in the description anyway, but digital assessments / certificate resources to help you prepare. What I'm going to be using in this video is this one. So there's a drop down menu. I mean, I recommend you look at everything, but specifically for this video, I'm going to be using, it's under learner guides, and it's this second one here, NEBOSH Scenario-Based Assessments Guidance. What that looks like when you download it is this. Go through it as part of your preparation for the exam. Read all of it. Don't skip anything. But what I'm going to do is the section that I'm going to be focused on, section 9, where it gives you some examples. So this is the question I'm going to be using, and this will probably be the next video. There's another example. So on example 1, it says, what financial arguments could you use to convince the manager that accidents are expensive for the organisation? And there's a note to say that you should support your answer where applicable using relevant information from the scenario. And then let's have a look at the NEBOSH guidance, although this is where I'm going to take the NEBOSH guidance and go much deeper. It says the question is looking for brief technical health and safety points such as sick pay, investigation costs and fines. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. Will just saying sick pay get you the mark? I do think that it's worth expanding on it a little bit, and I'll explain how to do that as part of this video. However, the scenario may reveal examples of these theoretical points, such as the employer received an unlimited fine. Identifying this would merit an extra mark. The question includes a specific note directing you to include evidence from the scenario. Okay, so let's have a look at the next example and compare the two. So it's a different question, but it's a different question type as well. So this is comment on the negative indicators of health and safety culture in the workplace. So it's not about financial arguments, it's about indicators of health and safety. But there's also a slight difference in that this is just saying what financial arguments could you use. It's not asking you to comment on. This is asking you to comment on. So it's not just asking for what the negative indicators are, you've got to comment on it. So what does NEBOSH say about the word comment? They say the use of the word comment invites a more detailed analysis. Okay, so I'm going to get into that in the next video. For now, what I'm going to do is drill down into this example. Go through it with you step by step and tell you exactly what you need to do to nail this type of question. You have to go about it a certain way though. I'll do it for this question, then in the next video I'll do exactly the same for the example 2 in the next video, and we'll look at the differences. But what I want to do is apply this to a scenario. The scenario I'm going to use is not even linked to this question. I'm using a scenario that I've got on our website so that you can access that scenario, and as I'm going through it you'll be able to kind of follow along, if that makes sense. So the first thing you do is, let's go into the technical health and safety points, or the theory. You start out with basically a list. What financial arguments? So we're looking for financial arguments. What we want is a list of financial arguments that convince the manager that accidents are expensive for the organisation. Here's an example of what a list like that might look like. Where'd you get this from? Well, first, let's look at the list first. So you've got fines, you've got sick pay, first aid, sick pay, medical treatment, equipment repairs, lost damage stock, lost production time, replacement staffing. They're just very, very brief theoretical points. We get this from our theory material, i.e. the textbook or your online course. Let's go to Stockwell Safety LMR. Bear with me while I navigate to the course. So this is course content, but you can get this from, this sort of stuff will be easily findable online. Just do a Google search and you'll find most of this stuff. But it's in basically element 1, morals and money. Let's open up that. We've got, there you go, the financial cost of accidents. We can develop a list by looking at things like direct and indirect costs, such as these, insured and uninsured costs. They can all be included in the list because it doesn't really ask you to distinguish between direct and indirect costs or insured and uninsured costs. So just sling all these things, into a list. There might be some duplication in the list. So what you're going to want to do is get rid of the duplication. I think I've already done that here. And even with getting rid of the duplication, you still, you could say that maybe 10 and 11 is the same thing, maybe even 13. I don't, but either way, we've got plenty to work with here. Let's kind of imagine that this question is a 10-point question. They don't actually give in this example. There's usually what you'll find in your actual exam is there'll be a number in brackets that will tell you how many points are available for this question. They haven't included it in the example here, but let's say for the sake of argument, 10 points available, and we'll work with that. So what we've got on our list, we've got 19 points here that we've got to play with. So this is going to be easy to do from here on in. But this is just a list. Okay, this is the first kind of point I want to really drive home here. Let's go back to NEBOSH's guidance. The question is looking for brief technical health and safety points such as sick pay, investigation costs and fines. Okay, we've got those on our list. We've got fines, we've got sick pay, but I want to just go back to that question again and look at it a bit more carefully. I don't think just saying sick pay is going to cut the mustard here. I think you do, because it's only going to take you a couple of seconds to just justify why sick pay is going to cost. You've got to be convincing. I always imagine a cantankerous company director, when you're trying to convince them to do anything in the name of health and safety, you say that you make an argument or you make a point and they just turn around and say, well, so what? I don't care. Well, what do you say then? Well, that's where the being convincing comes in and making an argument. You can't just, I don't think anyway, I don't think you could just trot out, oh, well, it's going to be like investigation costs. Oh yeah, so what? Well, and then it's whatever you say after the well that's going to be the convincing part. I think it's a good idea to include that in your answer. Let me tell you how exactly to do that. It's not really much involved in doing that. So there's the list. Second step, ensure it stands as an argument. i.e. each point that you make, just make sure that it is an argument, that you're not just saying like fines, because again they turn around and say, well, so what? Okay, well, based on the fine will be based on the potential harm, not the actual harm. You'll learn this as part of your course, that if somebody actually didn't suffer any harm as a result of an incident, but they could have done, it's the potential harm that they could have experienced that will be part of the decision making that the courts go through to determine what level of fine. Okay, same sort of thing for the second point on the list. Don't just put, well, first aid. It might not be obvious how that's going to cost the company money and how it can be expensive. Well, you could say, well, the first aid is going to be provided at whoever the first aider is, at their salaried rate. The accident never happened. That person wouldn't have had to give the first aid. They'd have been, carrying on with their job, which is what they're originally paid to do. Okay, the second thing then is, let's go back to the question. Brief technical health and safety points, such as blah, blah, blah. However, the scenario may reveal examples of these theoretical points, such as the employer received an unlimited fine. Identifying this would merit an extra mark. So this is this bit basically. So let's have a look at a scenario. NEBOSH don't provide a scenario with their example, but we could certainly have a look at one. This is a scenario that we've got available on our website, taken from a previous NEBOSH exam. And then you can go through this and then find evidence from the scenario. So in this scenario, while lifting some wooden boards near the unprotected edge, one of the contractor workers stumbles and falls 3 meters, hitting their head on the concrete floor below. That's a bit of information that we could use to support our answer. Let's take, for example, the fact that there's fines. Can we use that information from the scenario? Well, we can, because let me just go down to the next step here. We've got our point, we've made it into an argument, and here's the supporting information. Fell from an unprotected edge. That means that the fine is highly likely to occur, because the fact that there was an unprotected edge means that there's been a breach of the, of health and safety legislation, either the Health and Safety at Work Act, or it could be a breach of the Management of Health and Safety at Work regs, or it could be a breach of the, to make it more specific, it could be a breach of the work at height regulations. But there's clearly been a breach here, so a fine is highly likely to occur. And by putting in the fact that there was a fall from an unprotected edge, that's information from the scenario that we are using to support our answer. So now we are meeting everything that has been asked for. Let's look at the second one as well, first aid. We've already said that the first aid is provided at the first aider's salaried rate. The supervisor provides the first aid. A worker calls for an ambulance. This is in the scenario to where, see, it says it here, the supervisor is tending to the injured worker. So it's a supervisor's salaried rate, so they'll be on more. But it's up here where it says one of the workers calls an ambulance from their mobile phone. Getting further medical help is part of first aid. But by including these little bits of information in support of our argument that first aid is expensive for the organisation, we are giving NEBOSH what they have asked for in their note. So it's what NEBOSH want you to do are come up with financial arguments. These are the technical health and safety points. And they also want us to support our answer with information from the scenario. So this is what it might look like. So you're kind of constructing your answer with a table. This is how I advise you do it. But then to sort of type it up into your box that you're going to be provided with on exam day, how do you turn that into an actual answer? Well, here's how. Fines, which could be substantial as the amount is determined by potential harm, and are likely because the worker fell from an unprotected edge. How did I come up with that? You just kind of look at what you put and then just put it into sentence form. Don't overthink it. For first aid, whatever staff time and equipment is utilised due to the accident, brackets, supervisor provides first aid in this accident, are costs that could have been prevented. I just there's going to be many different ways that you can write that in sentence form. You don't have to kind of overthink it too much. There's going to be many ways that you can write each of these things in sentence form. And don't forget, we've got all that. You don't have to do the same for all of those, because I'm going to explain to you now how I think the marking might work for this question. Remember what I said at the beginning, that we're going to imagine that this is a 10-point question. I believe there would be a mark available for saying fines, which could be substantial, as the amount is determined by potential harm. So somewhere in there's going to be a mark, and then there will be another mark. This is the thing. This is what is going to get you double the points by using the information from the scenario. You would get another mark by saying that the worker fell from an unprotected edge. You're using information from the scenario. So we've got 1 point here, point number 1 on the list, but it's actually worth 2 marks. You see? In days of old, they used to say, make a point to gain a point, but actually it's a little bit more nuanced than that, because we've made a point, but we've actually got 2 points because we've also included information from the scenario. Same with the second one, first aid, whatever staff time and equipment is utilised due to the accident are costs that could have been prevented. There'll be a mark for that, so I'll put a tick somewhere along there. But then there will also be another mark for the fact that we've included information from the scenario. We've said that the supervisor provides first aid in this accident. Okay, so that's another 2 marks. Okay, so we've got 2 points, but we've got now 4 marks. Do you see how it works? You get marks for the theoretical points. You get also marks for including information from the scenario. Now, I don't want you to start thinking then, don't be under the impression that you can what I'm worried about is you saying to yourself, do you know what, never mind the information from the scenario. What I'll do, if it's worth 10 points, if the question is worth 10 points, what I'll do is I'll just slap that in there. Oh, I might make a few arguments like, what Adam said. I might do this sort of stuff as well. But here's my list. I've got 19 of them. I'll just copy and paste that from the, change a few words and sling that into the. No, don't do that, because without going into too much detail about it, but the mark schemes that examiners are provided with, NEBOSH are able to kind of instruct examiners to say, right, give a certain amount of marks for the theory, give a certain amount of marks for the supporting information from the scenario. And it might be such that there's only, say, for example, just to illustrate my point, let's say, for example, NEBOSH have made it clear to examiners via the mark scheme that there's a maximum of 5 points available for the theoretical side of things, and then the examiner cannot give any more than that for the theoretical side, and there's 5 marks available for supporting information, using supporting information from the scenario. Mark schemes don't work exactly like that, but like I said, I don't want to get bogged down with how mark schemes work, because that's for examiners to worry about. So if you go ahead and think to yourself, oh, do you know what, I've got 19 here, how can I possibly fail if the exam question is only worth 10 points? I've got 19 points here. I'm going to get maximum of 10 marks. No, you won't. You'll get a maximum of 5 marks in the sort of scenario I've just constructed here, because NEBOSH want you to use information from the scenario. So they're going to have the mark scheme set up in such a way as the examiner can only give marks if you do that. So you'll get a maximum of 5 marks, even though you've got 19 points, if you elect to not use information from the scenario. I hope I'm making sense here. You've got to do both. So we'd only need maybe another 3 of these, items 3 and 4 from the list. That'll get you to 8 points, and then another one will get you to the full 10. What I'm going to do in the next video is we'll have a look at this one. This one's different. This one's now asking us to comment on. So different question, obviously, different type of question as well. You'll see comment on questions a fair bit. You should definitely expect to get more than one comment on question in your exam. So I'm going to dive into the second example question in the next video, and then we'll make a compare and contrast between the two questions, because they've got slightly different approaches that you should take in order to get the maximum number of marks. Hope that makes sense. If you've got your exam coming up, best of luck. If you want to ask questions or you're stuck on anything that I've talked about in the video, ask a question in the comments and I'll try and get back to you. But for now, best of luck. See you in the next video.